What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and you all have been screaming at me to cover the Dakota Incident for like the last week and a half. The comments have been full of it. So there are two caveats to know about this comic book. Number one, I am not a Milestone guy. So while this does basically retcon the history of Milestone in varying degrees in order to bring it closer in line with the DC universe, I'm not knowledgeable enough about Milestone to be able to tell you what they've changed and what they have not changed. Number two, this is what I call a proof of concept comic, which is to say, if this comic does not sell well, as I understand it, DC will not continue anything that you see here. Or at least that's what the rumor mill says. So if you like this, you need to go and buy it. I know I don't say that often, but when the hell do we have to worry about DC Comics canceling Batman? Having said that, this initially picks up by way of a character named Beacon, and he's actually the one that kind of guides us through all the stuff that's going on here. Now, Beacon was introduced in the Static Batman Beyond comic, which we're in issue number 3. It's really, really good. You guys need to check it out. But he's ultimately caught up in essentially a cascading effect that's a result of alterations to the time stream. And so ultimately, he just jumps back in time in order to figure out where the time stream was changed and to try to find some way to rectify it. And that brings us to a point in the past. Now, we're not initially told exactly when this takes place, but we will get context clues and a pretty significant moment that will tell us exactly when this is going on. But what Beacon tells us here, you called it the golden year for the city of Dakota, the only real home that we've ever known. Grandma loved Dakota even more than you do. It was not a city like Metropolis or Gotham, no one flying overhead to save us or working in the shadows to protect us. Dakota did not have any superheroes, but it did have a guardian, Edwin Alva, industrialist, inventor, humanitarian. Now, what's going on here is you have Edwin having a conversation with Curtis, but things are not what they appear to be, because the initial conversation Edwin goes down here, right? Edwin just asked the question, when I look out this window, do you know what I see? And Curtis asks, what it is. And he says, we are close to achieving total prosperity and peace in Dakota, except for the one persistent problem. And he says, show me the latest, Curtis, right? And Curtis shows him Paris Island, the only neighborhood in Dakota with a spike in crime, 20 square blocks of it caused by the conflicts between 4 gangs. And so that's where Edwin just calls them children, right? Playing war games with self-conceived boundaries. We have to deal with them and the growing social unrest within the community. And he says, with government funding, Alva Industries has perfected a special gas to target the miscreants with a radioactive marker, right? And the whole idea behind this is it gives them the ability to track these guys down for later collection, right? Get all the bad elements off the streets. And that's where he's told by the mayor, do it, Edwin, make our city pristine. And so that's where Beacon continues on. And he says, they called it Operation Big Bang to make a new Dakota without gangs or protesters. You once told me that every good thing in our world was born from the universe screaming for something that it was missing. I remind myself of your words every day, of your faith in humanity to rise during times of suffering. The media called Edwin Alva a hero for ending the gang wars. You never did. A hero never recognizes themselves as such, which is a true statement, right? There's merit to the argument. Those who pursue power are usually the ones who should never have it, right? And so that's where the conversation between Edwin and Curtis continues on. And Curtis says here, it is time for me to be of greater service, Edwin, as a partner in Alva Industries. And that's where he's just told, I have no need of a partner, Curtis. You are here by my will, a will focused on saving Dakota from all its enemies, especially those of small mind and small vision, which basically is a betrayal, because what comes next is kind of astonishing, right? Beacon says, you told me how, in a moment of emotional weakness, Metcalf spoke to you about this day and what followed. Alva, the savior of Dakota, used his power and influence to frame Metcalf for the human casualty casualties of Operation Big Bang, turning the heir apparent into public enemy number one for multiple cases of manslaughter. In truth, the gas that was used against the protesters and the gang members did more than kill or mark them for arrest by the police. It changed them at the quantum level, effectively activating their metagenes, right? Where perception affects reality. Survivors from the different gangs developed metahuman abilities in the aftermath. They found solidarity in the ashes. The Blood Syndicate were among the first group of empowered Dakotans, but they were not superheroes. There were scattered reports of bang babies, survivors using their powers to terrorize people. Supercrime was emerging in Dakota until he showed up on the scene with a consistency and flamboyance that were undeniable. The first hero, Virgil Hawkins, wielder of the living lightning. Now, here's the thing to know, right? Of course, we're talking about Static here. Within the context of this, Static is really not that dissimilar from someone like Superman, right? And here's the reason why I say that. While Static is not on par with Superman in terms of power, the role they play is, right? When you start going through the history of DC Comics and you start looking at how various characters have kind of risen to prominence over the years and how those stories have changed and so on, Superman always kind of led the charge, right? That most superheroes out there in the DC universe look to Superman as a kind of leader and a symbol in some capacity. When it came to the Dakotaverse, seemingly Virgil was the same way, right? When he arrived on the scene and started operating as a hero, those individuals out there who either were using their powers for selfish means or were just raised in an environment where that was the only life they knew and then functioned accordingly with those powers, and seeing someone like Virgil step up, it was an inspiration. And so they in turn followed his lead. And that's why we start getting statements like a bright and shining beacon who showed others the way, including an aspiring writer who discovered an alien being living in Westwood, Dakota's wealthiest neighborhood. He landed on our planet in the year 1839. The writer told the alien her vision, a future of humanity achieving its highest potential with a new kind of hero in the skies, a symbol of our resilience, an icon for our times, with the writer becoming his partner, Rocket, my mom, Raquel Irvin, and Augustus Freeman, flying to save humanity at the speed of intention. And just, I have to point out, how poetic is that statement? It's one of the coolest statements that I think I've ever heard, right? Flying to save humanity at the speed of intention. I don't know why, it just sounds amazing when you say it. But it says, while Icon and Rocket patrolled the skies, Curtis Metcalf uncovered every bit of information he could find on Edwin Alva, all his secrets, and the real story of Operation Big Bang. Metcalf always considered himself to be on the side of the angels. The day he learned the man who betrayed him was the keeper of secrets extending far beyond Dakota's city limits. Framing Metcalf for his latest crime, the universe cried for revenge. Curtis Metcalf responded with Hardwire, the armored vigilante he created and became, waging a covert war on Alva Industries to destroy it at every level. Hardwire was the crusader. Icon and Rocket were the symbols. Static was the spark. This was the beginning of the age of milestones, an extraordinary time. Dakota became a city with superheroes, and everyday life was a wondrous thing, filled with unlimited possibility. But that's where he starts to say, wait, right? What's happening here? Right? He says, this is not part of the recorded history, not part of my history. This is when he starts to realize something's changed. Right, something in this timeline, in this moment, he's encroaching on the event that led to the cascading wave that he's experiencing, right? It's one of the things that we've talked about a litany of times, right? An event that alters the history of a universe, like an asteroid hitting the Earth, crashing down into the ocean, right? The tidal wave spreading in an outward direction, that's the change to the time stream, and that's what's happening here, right? He says, you taught me that fear is the genesis of action, but I am caught in the time stream of the past, and I am afraid. Now tethered to this moment, I realize that the collapse of my future began here, with the murder of Edwin Alva, engineer of misery. And so that's where you switch over to Hardwire when he's addressing all the members of the Blood Syndicate. And he says, Alva was in bed with a multi-government consortium, the Supermen Project, a covert plan to create superhumans controlled by the government and its most powerful benefactors, maintaining oversight of the empowered. And that's when they realize it includes all of them. And so that's when they start to realize, right, what happened at the Big Bang, it was on purpose, right? Alva created Dakota's metahumans as leverage. With our city primed to become a community teeming with superheroes, no one would dare make a move against Alva or Dakota. That's kind of the craziness of it all. It's because while Alva's entire motivation here was very different from how things unfolded in the real world, what we're talking about here is something akin to the Tuskegee experiments, right? Giving people a disease and then just leaving it untreated to see what happens. Pretty gruesome. The Tuskegee experiments were pretty screwed up. It's called the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, if you ever feel like looking it up. But the point is that Hardwire continues on. Since I found his body, that makes me the prime suspect of Alva's murder, with all superpowered Dakotans as additional suspects. The feds are not going to just let us exist now. We need to get ready for a fight. And so that's where we pick up with another statement, right? At 0200 hours, the vigilante our files designate as Hardware broke into Alva Industries. Its owner, Edwin Alva, is now dead, which means the city of Dakota is no longer protected by the confidential arrangements made for the sake of keeping the peace. So that's when you pick up with Sam Lane, Sergeant Rock, and Amanda Waller, all of whom are effectively co-conspirators, right? Willing participants in all of this, right? Sam Lane asked the question, what's the threat level? He's told by this individual, it's an omega threat level, right? Sergeant Rock asked the question, is negotiation an option? Can we order Superman? And that's where this guy says, no, that's the wrong play. And so Amanda Waller, right? Just ever the dickhead in DC Comics. It's just like, we need to move on this before the story of Dakota's superhumans gets out and exposes our government's role in the Supermen Project. This is a suicide mission, Mr. President, and that's when we find out she's talking to Lex Luthor. So right off the bat, this gives us context on when this story takes place, which is essentially during the Our Worlds at War storyline. So Imperiex, right, when basically DC had their version of Galactus. Yes, he was dope. No, the story sucked. But still, right, Lex Luthor was president, and I believe the inauguration happened in Superman Volume 2, Issue 166. But Lex being president here says, then you had better assemble the right squad, Miss Waller. I will tell Miss Grant what our PR spin is. I want Dakota brought under my authority by tonight. Now get moving, right? This is where things start to get cool, because this is when you start to see loyalties being tested, because you pick up with Bronze Tiger, Captain Boomerang, Deadshot, these members of the Suicide Squad, right? And Beacon says, this is not my history. I am witnessing an event that was never meant for me. And the fire in the sky signals that it's about to get worse. And so that's where they all kind of start getting their instructions. Your job is to go in here and to take care of these guys, right? Neutralize any target that resists. This is a pretty hardcore shoot to kill type of situation. And in fact, Digger Harkness just kind of says, finally get to clean up the hood proper. And that's where Bronze Tiger just starts to get pissed, because Bronze Tiger is a black guy, right? And Dakota is a black community. So when you have someone like Digger Harkness saying we get to clean up the hood, it comes across as a pretty nefarious statement, right? We get to get rid of those guys, right? That kind of thing. And so that's why Bronze Tiger says, watch your mouth, Harkness, or the next place that boomerang goes is down your throat. This is important for understanding his character based on what comes later, because Beacon continues on. That mural was a promise for Dakota to dream beyond its scars, but Luthor's dogs did not come for hope. They want to bury it. And so as soon as the Suicide Squad arrives on the scene, you basically have Dakota's own standing up to these guys. And I'm gonna tell you right now, they give them hell. Like, they absolutely unleash hell. It's amazing. And this is where the story takes off, right? Because at that point, Captain Boomerang is like, Waller, we need backup now, right? These freaks are trying to kill us. And so that's where Beacon says, right? You always said nobody wakes up feeling like a villain. Everyone down there believes that they are saving the world. But what hero stands by and allows this. They call this containment, like Dakota's something toxic, infecting everything until they stamp it out. And so in watching everything unfold, he says Mom is there, forcing barriers up until her nose bleeds, static, burning through pain again and again. Icon, his jaw set, determined that history will not carve scars into use again, their bodies breaking so the world won't. And here's where things get interesting, right? Is that Hardware confronts Bronze Tiger and says, I looked you up, Bronze Tiger, Army Ranger, League of Assassins, now Waller's attack dog. And that's where Bronze Tiger tells him, right? Waller briefed us on you too. She said that you're the one responsible for killing those protesters. And Hardware calls him out. And you just assumed she was telling the truth. At no point did you question it. At no point did you ask if she was wrong. You just took her word for it, right? And so that's where the two of them start fighting one another. Now, that's an important statement to make here, right? Just blindly believing something, you can't do that, especially when you're a federal agent, right? Because number one, you're assuming that the orders that you're being given are not nefarious. And number two, you're assuming that even if they don't appear nefarious, that they're not coming from a person that's acting in a nefarious way. And I mean, it's Amanda Waller. Come on, right? I mean, like, she doesn't have anyone's best interest at heart outside of her own, right? So can you ever really even trust anything Amanda Waller ever tells you, right? And so that's where Beacon continues on. I can see it in Bronze Tiger's eyes. The war inside him is louder than anything on this battlefield. And that's why I say that statement and that kind of back and forth between him and Digger Harkness was so important, because Bronze Tiger is really fighting two internal wars. On one hand, he's a part of the Suicide Squad, right? He's got a bomb in his head, and that if he disobeys orders, he will die. But on the other hand, he's watching agents turn their weapons against his own people, right? Other black individuals within this town. More so than that, they're willing to open fire on children. And that right there is way more than he can handle, right? He just says, I did not sign up to wage war on civilians. And so ultimately, he turns against the Suicide Squad, right? And that's where Beacon says, you always told me there is a moment in every life where you choose the orders or the mirror. And Deadshot's just watching it all, right? He says Waller's not going to like that. And Waller just says, I am already aware. Proceed with the mission, Deadshot. And so his job is to pick people off. And that's where, right, all these members in the Dakotaverse, all these superheroes who are literally just trying to protect their own, start to realize these guys aren't going anywhere. They're opening fire on any and everyone that they can see that they perceive to be a quote-unquote credible threat. And so he says, I am watching Ben Turner choose. That mother will never forget his face. Neither will history. And so that's where Captain Atom shows up on the scene, ever the government agent, and he says, by authority of the United States government, you will all stand down. And Icon responds, as just cracked as his character is, and he says, I've walked this earth for centuries, seen men like you wield your so-called authority time and time again. You have no such authority here. And that's why I say this dude is cracked, man, because he's going toe-to-toe with Captain Atom. You guys see what I mean? Right? The last time I read a Milestone comic, it was just kind of like, yeah, okay, whatever. This is dope as hell, right? Like, this is amazing. And so Beacon continues on, right? Captain Atom versus Icon, two gods, one fighting for a government, one for his adopted home. Even as I'm shielded in the time stream, every punch between them is an earthquake that splits me to my core. And so he asks, right, is this how my world shatters? Will no one rise up? Does violence get to write our final chapter? And in the midst of all of this, the Justice League shows up. Superman, Wonder Woman, Batman, and they bring an end to it like that, right? It stops immediately, just because of the fact that you're talking about the world's premier superhero team. But notice this, it's a really interesting contrast, and I can't help but believe that number one, anyone who's a fan of Milestone is going to notice this right off the bat and probably call it. And number two, I think it's DC, especially Joseph Ilges, doing it on purpose, right? That no one puts their guns down and no one stops shooting until the Justice League shows up, right? Well, then it's worth listening to, right? Then everybody starts paying paying attention. But that's where Static chimes in and he says, Batman, it's too late, right? You see what they did. This is our home. And even Bronze Tiger says, we should never have been here in the first place. This is not justice. It's oppression with extra steps. And so that's when he's told by Amanda Waller, right? If you walk away, I will pop your head like a grape. Do you hear me? And he just takes out the earpiece and just says, I've compromised enough of myself for this system. History is watching, and I fear I am on the wrong side of it. And so ultimately, everything ends. By the time the sun comes up, because this all happens at night, right? Sneaking in like thieves in the night in order to try to take out all these people so that no one will seemingly notice. Right? I mean, the whole damn town noticed, but no one outside of the town would notice. While the world is asleep, Dakota was being massacred, right? And so once the sun comes up, now everybody starts having this conversation, right? Beacon says, the longer I'm in the time stream, the more my memories begin to blur. And that's where you have, right, Blood Syndicate who's saying, they attacked us, right? And even Icon tries to calm them down. Like he literally says, calm down, both of you. And Wonder Woman just says, it's okay, Icon. Like we figure it's better that you find out now, so you're not blindsided by any of this in that room. Now, what's she referring to? Well, that comes a little bit earlier when Batman says, Luthor wants to prohibit all metahuman activity in Dakota, and he's got the city's government in his pocket. Anyone who uses their powers will be prosecuted, right? So effectively what they're being told is that they gained abilities by no fault of their own. The attempt of the government was to sweep it all under the rug and to basically disappear them all into black bags, right? And just toss them unceremoniously, probably in some graves or what have you, right? Just eliminate all the superheroes in the city. Now that the Justice League has arrived on the scene and effectively saved the day, quote unquote, and essentially ended the attack within the city of Dakota, now they're being prohibited from using their powers. And so it's always kind of like the doors closing in, right? The walls closing in on every side. And even Superman recognizes this, right? This is wrong. To be honest, if I were in your position, I'm not sure what I would do. But Dakota is your home. It is your decision, not the Justice League's. And so even Icon says, I know how these things go, Superman. We could get back up after every hit, but the city cannot. We need to try another way forward. But that's what's interesting here, right? Because Rocket says, so we're just rolling over, right? You're telling the people that you promised to protect that they are not worth fighting for. It's nice to know what Icon really stands for when his back's against the wall. So now we're talking about ideological differences here, right? From Icon's perspective, it's simply that we can withstand rockets and we can withstand any number of armies that are coming after us. And I certainly can, right? Because I'm Icon and I'm just ridiculously OP. But like the 80-year-old woman who walks 3 blocks down to get to work, can she withstand it? Can she handle it? Right? That's the bigger picture that he's looking at here. If we continue doing this, we will put the citizens in danger, not ourselves, right? This is bigger than us. So again, ideological back and forth. And so that's where Beacon says, I remember a life where the heroes of Dakota thrive for generations, and a life where the age of milestones ended before it really got a chance to begin. Everything is jumbled, but I remember everything you told me about this day. Because ultimately, when they go to meet with Lex Luthor, they meet with Jefferson Pierce as well, right? Black Lightning, who's currently serving as the Secretary of Education. Now, I don't know that I'd go so far as to say that Jefferson Pierce's mindset throughout all of this was that it's better to be the devil's right hand than in his path. It actually really seems to come from a place of altruism, right? Where he says, I've been tasked with watching over you two while the meeting takes place so cooler heads can prevail in the negotiation. And where Static is initially like, dude, they tried to kill us all in our own town. How could you possibly be caught up with all of this? The response of Jefferson is to say, I'm just doing what I can to help you all get the best outcome for Dakota possible. But that's where he's told by Rocket, you are here for the same reason that we are. They do not value you. And that's where he says, you sound just like my daughter. And this is where the altruism seems to come into play when he says, look, I'm trying my best, right? I saw the chance of a cabinet position as a seat at the table where I could enact real change. But under Luthor, I quickly learned that when a system thrives on corruption, working within it is impossible. And he says, to be frank, I don't know what to do anymore. I don't know how to give you the reassurance that everything is going to be all right. But progress is not made by standing still. And so when the question's asked, what are we supposed to do? He just says, look, as a mentor and a friend, I urge you guys to be careful. But honestly, as a father and a black man, I say, do what you have to do, right? Do whatever needs to be done. And so that's where you switch over to Icon meeting with Lex Luthor. And Lex Luthor makes it very, very clear, right, that if they choose to pursue this path of challenging him, consequences will be paid. And this is where he preys on the idea that the citizens of Dakota would be the ones in danger. Because Icon tells him, right, I have been on this planet, in this country, since 1839. I have seen many men who look like you stomp out the exploits of people who look like me. Do you not realize how quickly and decisively I could take you out if I wanted to, Mr. President? But Luthor tells him, let's be wise, Icon. Remember, there is a Kryptonian down the hall. We both know that killing me will not solve your problems. The consequences would be far more catastrophic. All the lives that you've been fighting for would be at risk because you took the life of a sitting president, not just on the world stage, but here. What happens to Virgil and Raquel's poor loved ones? Your heroes may be able to withstand the ensuing chaos, but they most certainly wouldn't. So, let's be rational, because it's basically him saying, you could kill me, but then we will go after everyone you've ever loved and ever met, and we will burn down everything around you. So, what's more important to you? Making a deal with the devil, arguably, Lex Luthor is a dickhead, or killing me? Right? And so that's where Hardware says, right, Static and Rocket cannot do what needs to be done, but you and I can, right? Take out Luthor, take on the Justice League, anyone they send after us, we can go down swinging, just say the word. But Icon says, no, right? That would make us fugitives. And then we would really be abandoning Dakota. Luthor also knows our identities, so we're in a checkmate. First Alva was killed, now we're forced to take the fall. Something is off about all of this, but continuing to fight puts innocent lives at risk. We have to start thinking about what comes after the ink dries. Out of all of Dakota, we are the ones with a seat at the table. We need to leave it with everyone's best interests at heart. And so ultimately it kind of turns into this conversation of there are other ways to help Dakota besides operating as superheroes publicly and with our powers. And so that's ultimately when Static and Jefferson and Raquel end up entering into the war room just in time to see Icon shaking hands with Lex Luthor. And here's what's crazy about this. Lex goes to shake hands with Static, right? In agreement among all of them that none of the superheroes in Dakota will use their powers. And for a brief moment, Static knows he could kill Lex like that. He could kill him in an instant, right? And there's nothing Lex could do about it. But again, the bigger issue here is all the collateral damage. And that's what Beacon says. He was the spark that lit the fire. Of the four of you, he was the only one the Big Bang gave powers to. He felt the burden of responsibility being Dakota's first hero to keep that flame alive. But all that was left now was ash, because ultimately, he agrees to stand down, and he agrees to walk away from being a superhero. And so Beacon says, in these new memories of mine, you never told me bedtime stories or sang me lullabies. Instead, you read me the same poem every night, Harlem by Langston Hughes. It was about the Harlem Renaissance and how, as quickly as a dream can become reality, it can be deferred or denied. Now, there's obvious direct comparisons here to what happened with Adam Brashear the Blue Marvel, and that's what makes this even more interesting. It's a president of the United States asking a black superhero to stand down. The motivations behind them were different, right? You were talking about race relations in the 60s as far as Blue Marvel goes. In this instance, they're literally being threatened with the lives of their loved ones, but they're being asked to step down nonetheless. And so Superman, in seeing all of this, just says, we are sorry it had to be this way. And Wonder Woman just says, trust us, right? We'll be keeping an eye on Luthor. But cold comfort for a handful of superheroes who have effectively lost the entirety of their identities, right? These new definitions of themselves for no other reason than the fact that they just cannot be controlled, right? They're the wrong kind of superhero, quote unquote. And so that's where Beacon says, while Augustus encouraged Curtis sought alternative ways to keep Dakota safe, and Uncle Virgil buried his face in his studies as a distraction from what he had lost. You hit the ground running to create a future where the dream could become a reality again, and you poured all that energy into me. In both timelines, I am an extension of you, and as I inch closer to exiting this time stream, the goal is clear. I need to light the way. The past may have changed, though there's still a chance to save my future, but I cannot do it alone. So, where is Static? And so that's when you pick up with Virgil, when like Beacon just comes crashing down in front of the shop where Virgil's at, right? And he just kind of goes running up on him, right? As if he knows him, right? And he just says, Virgil, thank God you're here. And he says, I need your help. But Virgil doesn't know who he is, right? He's like, who in the heck are you? What is this all about? And Beacon just says, everything we know and love ceasing to exist. Your present is hollow, echoing a promise of a future that will never come to pass. That is, unless you're willing to be the catalyst for that future. And initially Static just talks to him like, I don't know what you're talking about, right? But Beacon continues on. You say that like you didn't just see me crash into the pavement out of nowhere. And he says, I've seen your past, the effects of Alva's death. It changed the trajectory, but not the destination. You are the key to saving the future. And so that's where Static tells him, go tell the Justice League, you've got the wrong guy. Because Static kind of sees all of this as a test, seemingly. But again, Beacon tells him, so this is who you've become, the hero who showed everyone the way. You could have fooled me. And so it's a challenge to his character, right? It's a challenge to him. You are a coward. You're yellow belly, right? You are weak and you are soft and you are not the man I thought you were, right? And that's what he says. I said exactly what I said. Just like the Static, I know would have said. And he said, what you've done, the hero you were, the hero you're fated to become, you cannot begin to understand the weight you carry, what you being Static has meant to others, who you've inspired to be better, Mom and me included. And I'm sorry that losing to Luthor hit you hard, but you think that's an excuse to give up? Is that who you are? Mom, Augustus, Curtis, the Syndicate, they all found ways to keep fighting. But what about you? Right? I came to you because you are the spark that lit the fire. It's not too late for that spark to come back. And so that's where he says, right, if you do not get back out there, my world, your future, falls apart. And that's where the suit chimes in, right? Temporal safeguards offline, temporal erasure imminent. So Beacon is literally wiped out of existence, right? And he says, you are the best of us, Uncle Virgil. It's time to wake up. And that's when he realizes it's Amistad, right? And so in that moment, he just goes running through his apartment, right? Once he gets back there, he starts running through his place, looking under everything he can. He finds a box and he says, no more hiding, right? He's right. I have to accept that part of myself again for my family, for Dakota, and for a better tomorrow. It is time for Static to fight back. And so this is why I say it's a proof of concept comic. It ends on a cliffhanger. So if this doesn't really sell very well, nothing will ever really come of it. But if it does, DC will definitely make more of this stuff. So with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. Make sure you guys get out there and buy the comic. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.